All right. Well, great.
Yes.
Would you like to come up?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come up. So I am both the introduction and part of the program today, for no other reason than, as you know, I can't give up the stage if I've gotten it. But so I'm going to start with just a little background of why we're having this program today and how we got here, and then I'm going to introduce the new Director of Aviation for Humboldt County. But for many years, the Aviation Division was part of the Public Works Department of Humboldt County. And that was not, quite honestly, an optimal relationship. And if for no other reason than airports in general have to be run like businesses. In other words, they're supposed to support themselves through their own revenue. And that's unlike other parts of the county, which get tax revenue and kind of do that. And so it wasn't a great fit. And if you look at even the county budget, the Aviation Division is completely separate in the budget and I mean in the audit. It's called a business enterprise. And so there was a number of us for many, many years. In fact, as early as 1973, the grand jury said, split off the department from Public Works. So the county hopped right on it and did that last year. That's one of my favorite jokes. It always gets a laugh. So a little over a year ago, a group of us really advocated, and I was on the chair of the Aviation Advisory Committee. We advocated for back then for a management study for the Aviation Division that not only came up with how to best govern and run the organization, but also some strategic initiatives that they can undertake to improve the services, expand it, improve the budget. And so last December 19th, I can remember the day, the Board of Supervisors voted to do two things upon the completion of this study, which went on for about 10 months prior to that. One of which was to split it off as its own department, as suggested in 1973. And then to hire a new director. And that director then answers essentially directly to the Board of Supervisors, rather than being 2 or 3 levels down in Public Works, is where the airport manager used to be. And now, some of you know, my wife worked at the airport. She wasn't even the airport manager. She was below the airport manager. So, so it was many levels down. And so now the position has been elevated. The department is separate. The county is now investing some general fund dollars because, quite honestly, that money has been drained out. They're putting it back in and reinvesting, and so there's a lot of hope. And all of our hopes and dreams of the county now rest upon Cody's shoulders. So, so September 24th, Cody Roggatz started as the Director of Aviation. And Cody has a big background. He even went to school to learn it. Was at Boeing Field in Burbank. And then we hired him. I was actually on the interview committee. Don't forget that next time we go out. Came from Aberdeen, South Dakota, and Cody is where he was a transportation director, which included the airport in Aberdeen, which has a small commercial airport. Cody is very thrilled to be here in the winter and not there. And so I want to bring him up. He's going to tell a little bit about what's going on up there, what he sees, and where we're going. And then I'll come back up and talk to you a little bit about air service, which is for my thing. So, Cody, why don't you come on up? All right. And I will sit
down. Thank you, Greg, for that introduction, and thank you guys for having me here today. I really appreciate it. A couple of things on Greg's introduction there. In 1973, my father would have been a freshman in high school, so I certainly wasn't around or even a twinkle in anybody's eye at that time. And Greg mentioned my last stop was Aberdeen, South Dakota. I spent 4.5 years there managing regional airports and our transit agency. And Greg was correct. I'm extremely excited to be here, especially this time of year. I've gotten a few texts and pictures from former staff. I think they're now battling about their 6th snowstorm already this winter season out there. So sleeping much better coming out here and not at the airport at 2 a.m. playing in the snow and making snow angels out there. So that's exciting. Greg mentioned a little bit of the background on what brought me here. there's a lot of things that are changing even on a daily basis with our new Department of Aviation. Gregg mentioned I'm working with the Board of Supervisors, also the County Administrative Officer, and the date that sticks in my head, not just September 24th, my start date, but November 13th, I did a little bit of a happy dance in the office, and I don't think anybody recorded it because nobody wants to see it like this young gentleman. Nice moves earlier, but Amy took an item before the board and was approved for my first full-time staff in the office, which was extremely exciting for me. When I've done a side-by-side comparison to my old airport organization to this one, I had the same staffing level for airfield management here as I did out there, but I had one small regional airport. Here I have a much larger regional airport and 5 general aviation airports scattered throughout the county that we're trying to operate and maintain. So that office staff coming on board is critical. We have quite a few other needs for our organization to properly operate and maintain the facilities. And a lot of times when I'm speaking with groups like this, I get the question, what do you do as an airport manager? Or what do the government staff do as far as operating and maintaining the airport? In addition to that question, a lot of times I get asked by folks, can you get me a free ticket? No, I cannot. And no, I'm not in control of the airline schedule. But what we do on a day-to-day basis, we have tens of thousands of pages of FAA regulations that we are responsible to keep the ACB airport up to those standards. We also have security regulations that we're responsible for to keep the airport up to those standards. Surprising to some folks, the TSA staff that's at the checkpoint that you all interact with when you fly out, they're not in charge of security. They are in charge of the checkpoint and screening, and then screening of your checked bags. My staff is actually responsible for the security of the airfield, and the TSA is a piece of that. And then Gregg mentioned the business aspect. So the county is essentially the owner and landlord of the airport, 6 airport facilities around the county. Our responsibility is to treat that like a business, as Gregg mentioned, and we enter into lease agreements with different users at the airport. You are all probably familiar with SkyWest or United Airlines, as you see on the aircraft. So we have a business agreement in place with them, which expired in 2016. And that's one of my large projects that I have on my plate right now, is to get that updated and up to current standards as far as what we are charging the airline to operate in and out of our facility. That's a big piece of improving the business picture at our within our organization, and I just have started with the big apple, if you will, and trying to take a bite out of that, and then move on down the line as we go, and working with our other tenants and our general aviation users to work on bringing things up to modern standards as far as how airports are run and operated and maintained. So, any questions on what I've covered so far?
What are the 6 airports?
All right. I actually stuttered on this in my interview. Gregg heard it. We have the California Redwood Coast Humboldt County Airport. Most folks call that the Arcadia Eureka Airport, which is in McKinleyville. And Murray Field down in Eureka. You have Ronerville, which is adjacent to Fortuna, Garberville down by Redway, and then out east, which I have yet to visit these facilities, we have Beeland and Dinsmore. So that's a lot for the staffing level that we have. As I mentioned earlier, it's the same staff level that I had in Aberdeen. And in addition to Aberdeen, a couple of responsibilities that my staff here have. It's not just operating and maintaining. So operations is ensuring on a day-to-day basis that you're compliant with those federal requirements that I mentioned earlier, and then changing light bulbs, doing cracks, pavement maintenance, electrical work, so on and so forth. They also have the fueling responsibilities at ACV, and they also have the firefighting responsibilities at ACV. So there's entire books of training that they need to do on an annual basis just to ensure our compliance with those two pieces to the puzzle. So there's a lot of work, not Greg mentioned on my shoulders, but also on my staff's shoulders. And that's what we're trying to improve on a day-to-day basis. Bringing somebody into the office full-time is a big step in that. But there's other needs that we have. One, to maintain my staff's sanity, and two, more importantly, to deliver the customer service that I expect us to deliver and our customers expect out of us on a day-to-day basis. So.
What's the status of the restaurant? You know that it kind of died. It kind of died a slow death because of the level of traffic there. But there was a time when people used to come from town and go there, just like going to someplace else in town. I mean, it was a good restaurant and people actually went there. And then it basically just kind of died a slow death and hasn't been around for quite a while.
Yeah, great question. And I'm actually a citizen of McKinleyville, so I would love to see more options for dining. I don't have either the time and, more importantly, the skill to prepare anything of good taste in the kitchen. So I certainly utilize the restaurants we do have on a regular basis in McKinleyville, and would love to see that grow. The restaurant, I've been filled in on the history on what has occurred in that space that used to be a restaurant since I have arrived. In fact, I think I even heard a little bit about it before I embarked upon my journey from South Dakota out this direction. But my challenge with the restaurant space, or the space that used to occupy a restaurant, is to figure out how we ensure that that's a profitable endeavor for us. And when I say that, what we might invest into that space, how do we get that money back out of there and then show that that's a revenue generator for the airport and for the county long term to help support all the responsibilities that I mentioned that we have out there as the county owning and operating the facility.
You know you can't give away free tickets, but as the landlords, how do you see the new carrier agreement influencing passenger pricing? Will it put upward pressure or relieve some of that? Or does it even have an influence on it?
So I'll probably ask Greg to come back up and join me. You were asking air service, an air service related question there. So Greg deserves the credit in the room, and I've had to inform some folks that thank Greg, don't thank me. But on my third week in my new office, the phone started ringing off the hook on Monday morning, and it was United Corporate telling me that they were about to announce new air service direct to Denver, which will be coming June 7th of 2019. And that's pretty exciting. And I think Greg deserves a round of applause, not just for getting that, but also for those of you that haven't been out to the airport recently or haven't flown out, we also offer direct daily service to LAX now. And that's 2 new routes in 2 years. That's a pretty big deal. And I can tell you that's a big deal because I went to a conference a month and a half ago with Greg, and he was getting a lot of pats on the back. In this competitive industry of air service development, that's really something to brag about. So kudos to Greg for his work on that. The question about downward pressure on prices, we will, as of June 7th, 2019, be offering direct service 4 times daily to and from San Francisco, once daily to and from LAX, and then once daily to and from Denver. The new service to Denver may put a slight bit of downward pressure on pricing, just as they try to fill those additional seats. that are now going to be offered in our market. But the real key to downward pressure on pricing would be competition. And this isn't necessarily competition we're bringing in because it's still going to be a United flight in the United system. So that's something that Gregg and I are working on a daily basis. And as I've heard Gregg say many a times, and I know I will realize in my time moving forward here, these things take years to develop, which is why when I was receiving calls from Board of Supervisor members on that Monday morning, hey, congratulations, you work really quickly. Call Gregg and say thanks to him. So, any other questions specifically?
On what you just said, I thought we had 2 flights going to LA. Is that
No, just one.
Just one currently.
Well, there's one that comes back.
Yeah.
morning and afternoon?
No, yeah.
So
I would love to have that.
yeah, is it Scott? So Scott's question was, I thought we had 2 flights to LA every day. One thing that we've recognized and United has recognized with the addition of that LAX service was that the demand in our area for that LAX direct route is higher than they even anticipated. We have, correct me if I'm wrong here, Gregg, but every month since starting that service in June, we've exceeded 90% load factor. Just last month.
We know what's going on in San Francisco.
Yes. Which is the pitch I made to them every year since 2011. Yeah, we, in November, the first month of June, we had a 77%, which is pretty darn good for
Right.
the first month.
Right.
And then over 95%.
Just last month, Gregg and I just got the numbers here this past week, but it was at 95%. And the airline industry, they're typically looking for that 75 to 80% ballpark. There's a lot of variables that go into this, but that's typically the range they want to exceed to make it a profitable route. So at 95% has been phenomenal, or exceeding 90% has been phenomenal for United and for us, which we've seen our passenger numbers compared to last year are far exceeding the performance overall of the airport as well. So, holy cow. It's okay. It's okay. In the Midwest, we say oofda.
I would just like to ask, I'm assuming the answer to this already, but is there any consideration of ever having a direct flight to Portland?
Yes, there is consideration. Portland is one that I get asked about quite frequently, and then the other route, which would be very much in my own personal interest because I know I'm going to have to go to a lot of meetings down there, is Sacramento. And unfortunately with those 2 routes, the challenge is that Portland and Sacramento don't serve as a hub for any of the major airlines. So when we're looking at our area of the United States, I'll just go down the coast quickly. Seattle is a hub for Alaska and Delta. Portland is a quasi-hub for Alaska, if you will. But more than likely, if Alaska was to consider us, they would try to run us to Seattle. San Francisco is dominated by United, as you're all aware. LAX is a hub for all 3 of the majors, American, United, and Delta. And then as you move over, Salt Lake is a hub for Delta, and Phoenix is a hub for American. In saying all of that, really our options in the future would more than likely lie with Salt Lake or Seattle as the next options down the road.
So why Denver?
So there's quite a few reasons why, but primarily United's advantage in their network. For those that aren't aware, United is a massive hub Denver is a massive hub for United. And not only is it a massive hub for domestic service, it also offers a lot of international routes that you can't get direct out of San Francisco and LA. So that's where United sees an advantage, is more direct routes right out of Denver to the Midwest, to the East Coast, to the South actually, and then also some international options that folks don't have directly out of San Francisco or LA. So prior to right now, the way we sit without the Denver service, there's a lot of routes that you would have to take to the East Coast where you would fly to San Francisco or LA, and then you would either stop in Denver or Chicago or Houston in United's route. And I can tell you from experience that's the case, because when Gregg and I went to our meeting in Memphis, I flew from here to San Francisco to Houston, Houston to Memphis. It was like a 12 to 14 hour travel day. And that's a whole lot of fun for you, those of you in the room that have done things like that, just to get halfway across our country, not even to the East Coast. So
Let me add, I'm just gonna add a little bit about how we don't pick the destinations. What we do is we pitch destinations. And so we talk to all the airlines and we say, hey, Alaska, because the way this works is you gotta know their business model. I'll be perfectly frank, they don't give a crap about our business model, right? We're not big enough to even qualify as a rounding error. But what, right? I mean, we just got the snort that Anyway, so what we do is we pitch. So if I go to Alaska, I'm going to say, hey, Alaska, where are you building your traffic? That would be Seattle, right? Now, Alaska is a tiny airline. I mean, people go, oh, Alaska is tiny. It's number 5. The top 4 control over 80% of the market. So it's down there with a bunch of little airlines. We don't think of it that way. So when we go to United, we say, hey, United, we would like to see, because we read the trades. Oh, they're building LA. So we've been pitching LA for them forever. In fact, we had a contract in 2012. We pitch Denver and LA because we know that's where they're going to fly. Plus, we're flying regional jets, so we're only going to go to about 1,100 miles. So if we go to American, I'm telling American, gee, I'd like to have Phoenix, which they picked up as a hub when they bought US Air, and LAX, because I know that's where they're going to fly. And so we pitched all the destinations. I even pitched Sacramento, and Cody's bosses, and I'll be somewhat impolitic, because he can't, but I can. You know, Cody's bosses are always on me, the supervisor, saying, you got to get to Sacramento. We go there all the time. We go there all the time. And I just say, listen, that flight was at best half full. And I've got all the data to show that. So I'm going to go pitch to them, we want you to fly an unprofitable route because some supervisors don't like driving. And United's going to say, no. So we're pitching all the time. So we'll do 2 or 3 meetings a year where we go and meet and pitch different destinations. And then the airlines pick. We don't pick, and we don't control schedule, as he said. We don't control pricing. They make the pick. We're just selling. As Cody said earlier, we're just landlords. We're like running a mall, right? And what we're doing is trying to get someone to decide to do business in our mall. And so that's the way. That's how the pitch works. That's how this industry works. And Cody's right. It's a small industry. So when I go to Memphis, you know, I've got relationships with some of those people that are 15 years long. And so they know me, I know them, we've talked routes. Some of the network planners have worked at 2 or 3 different airlines. And so they know our market. It's all about that, so that's a top of mind thing. So when they are deciding for new routes, they go, oh, you know, maybe we'll look at Arcata. Gregg's always bugging us. Talk about that. So, anyway.
Do they care if we want to go to LA, or are they trying to get us to buy a ticket to Hawaii or Europe, and so they want us to get to LA so that we'll buy the whole thing?
Both. And Gregg was kind of highlighting it there. The number one care that all of these airlines have, whether you're talking about United, Alaska, Delta, American, Southwest, anybody across the board, all they care about is making money. And I'm assuming I'm in a room. Yeah, I'm assuming I'm in a room full of folks that are in different lines of business, so you all understand that. But we are just the the house that they can do that in, per se, in this area. So the question about do they care if we just fly to LA, or are we trying to connect to Hawaii or somewhere else? They just care about what that fare is that they charge from here to LA. They don't care if you stop in LA or if you're continuing on to Hawaii or somewhere else. They're actually monitoring what they're charging you for that leg from here to LA and trying to ensure that they're making a profit on that fare that they charge you for that leg.
And so any idea if you book a flight out of LA to Europe, are they gonna make, or from here to LA to Europe, are they gonna make any money on this leg? Or are they giving this away to sell the other ticket?
It's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
The way the revenue model works for here, and we write contracts to look at this. We get the fare here, and then we get what's called a coupon, which is a percentage of the connecting fare that's targeted back to us. That counts into our revenue, and so we need to make it on just our own, but we do get some benefit for the connection. But yeah, this route, that single destination has to stand on its own. You can't just.
And it's just as a broad brush overview for the airlines, American, United, and Delta, and Alaska, it's a hub and spoke system. We're a spoke on those major hubs. So what Gregg and I are trying to do, as he mentioned, we're a blip on the radar, is add to the amount of options that you all have, that we have, for additional spokes into those hubs.
The story I heard long ago was that the airport was originally built by the Army because they were looking for a really foggy place where they could even get pilots to fly in the fog.
Correct.
And then we took it over because there was already infrastructure there. And there's fog issues. Has there ever been thought of moving the airport to like the lake or some other place that has less fog issues?
I will tell you, I don't have direct experience in moving an entire airport, but I do know of a community that's doing that currently, and that would be Williston, North Dakota. And they are spending to the tune of, I think it's now approaching $300 million to do something like that. And when we're normally doing projects at the airport, it's normally 90% federal dollars. Certain projects, I should say, 90% federal dollars, grants from the FAA, and then 10% from the County of Humboldt. That's not the configuration of that grant for Williston, North Dakota, and I actually met on Tuesday in San Francisco with a gal that signed off on that because she used to be in charge of North Dakota and South Dakota. So the community and the city of Williston and the county that they lie in are, I believe, spending to the tune of $100 million locally to get that effort forward. So
Airports are very expensive, and I can tell you, yes, it was built there because of fog, but it's also built there because Dow's Prairie is probably the flattest, biggest obstruction-free place we have in Humboldt County. And so, if you think about Blue Lake, it's surrounded by mountains, so you don't have that nice glide slope, that's a 3-degree glide slope that they need. And like Fortuna literally isn't big enough. I mean, Fortuna for many years was saying, move the airport to Ronerville, and I took a Google map and said, you don't have space for a runway. So that runway is 6,023 feet long plus safety areas. That's over a mile, and then you need all the clear space, obstruction-free, no trees, no towers, no nothing, no mountains, so that plane can come in, because you don't want to do this. You like to do this. Right?
that was a new thing for me to see as well. I'll just add on to what Gregg said there. Coming from North Dakota and South Dakota, there's like 3 trees in the entire state. Moving here, it is hard to find areas that we don't have forests surrounding or right there, so, which is a challenge for the safety of flight.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we had you for today because you guys did a great job of filling in with questions. So thank you very much.